The bullet shattered the window inches from her head. Clara Merrick pressed herself against the splintered door frame, heart hammering, as the outlaw's voice cut through the chaos. "That's her, the one who saw our faces." Rowan Hale moved without thinking, his body a shield between the terrified stranger and certain death. He'd sworn off caring about anyone years ago. Tonight, that promise died in the smoke and gunfire of Pine Hollow's main street. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The Wyoming wind carried dust and forgotten promises across the high plains, and Rowan Hale had made peace with both. At 34, he'd learned that the land demanded everything and gave back only what a man could wrestle from its stubborn grip. Love, loyalty, companionship, those were luxuries for men who hadn't buried the people they cared about in shallow frontier graves. The setting sun painted Pine Hollow in shades of amber and rust as Rowan guided his horse down Main Street. The town was barely more than a collection of weathered buildings clinging to existence in the shadow of the Medicine Bow Mountains. But it was home, or as close to home as a man like him deserved. The saloon doors hung crooked on their hinges. The general store's windows were filmed with the perpetual dust that no amount of cleaning could defeat. The church steeple listed slightly to the left, as if even God couldn't quite stand up straight against the relentless wind. It was a hard town for hard people, and Rowan fit right in. He'd just finished selling a dozen head of cattle to the railroad agent. Enough to get him through another winter of solitude on his small ranch 5 miles outside town. The coin sat heavy in his saddlebag, and heavier still was the silence waiting for him back at the empty house. "Rowan, hold up!" Sheriff Tom Ramsey emerged from his office, his weathered face creased with something between concern and relief. At 53, Ramsey had the look of a man who'd seen too much trouble and not enough justice. His badge caught the dying light as he approached, and Rowan felt his shoulders tense. Nothing good ever came from a lawman's urgency. "Tom." Rowan's greeting was economical, like everything about him. "Need a favor." Ramsey glanced back toward his office. "Stagecoach got hit about 10 miles south this afternoon. Driver made it through, but the passengers got robbed. Most of them are locals, got friends or family to take them in. But there's one, a young woman traveling alone. Name's Clara Merrick." Rowan's expression didn't change. "Hotel's got rooms. Full up. Cattle buyers came through yesterday, took every bed in town." Ramsey's voice carried the weight of a man asking something he knew would be refused. "She's got no money now. They took everything. No way to wire for funds until Monday when the telegraph office opens. She needs a safe place for a few nights." "Not my problem, Tom." "She's alone, Rowan. Barely 25, I'd guess. Got nobody." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "You got that spare room since Martha passed? Just a few days until we can sort this out." The mention of Martha, his sister, dead 3 years from fever, landed like a fist to Rowan's gut. Martha had been the last person he'd allowed himself to care about, and watching her die had sealed the door on whatever remained of his capacity for connection. The church, Reverend Michaels and his wife left yesterday for their daughter's wedding in Laramie, won't be back for a week. Ramsey's voice softened. "I wouldn't ask if there was anywhere else, but you know what this town can be like. Trail workers, drifters, men with no respect for a woman alone. I can't keep her at the jail. That's no place for a lady." Rowan stared at the mountains in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. He thought about his empty house, the spare room that still smelled faintly of Martha's lavender soap. He thought about the silence that had become his only companion. 3 days, he finally said. Not a day more. She stays out of my way. I stay out of hers. I appreciate it, Rowan. I know it's not... Save it. Rowan dismounted, tying his horse to the rail. Let's get this over with. The interior of the sheriff's office was dim and spare. A desk, 2 chairs, a gun rack, and a holding cell that currently stood empty. Sitting in one of his chairs, her back straight despite obvious exhaustion, was Clara Merrick. She wasn't what Rowan expected. He'd pictured someone soft, pampered, the kind of Eastern woman who came west with romantic notions and impractical shoes. Instead, Clara Merrick looked like she'd already survived several storms and was bracing for the next one. Her dark hair was pinned back in a practical bun, loose strands escaping around her face. Her traveling dress was simple gray wool, dusty and creased from the journey. But it was her eyes that caught him, gray-blue and direct, meeting his gaze without flinching or fluttering. "Miss Merrick, this is Rowan Hale," Ramsay said. "He's agreed to let you stay at his place until we can sort out your situation." Clara stood, and Rowan noticed she was taller than most women, her eyes nearly level with his chin. She extended her hand like a man would, not waiting for him to take it first. "Mr. Hale, I appreciate your hospitality. I know this is an imposition." Her handshake was firm, her palm calloused. Not a pampered Eastern girl after all. 3 days? Rowan said. "There's a spare room. You stay there, stay out of my business, and we'll get along fine." A flicker of something, amusement, irritation, crossed her face. "I assure you, Mr. Hale, I have no interest in your business. I simply need a safe place to sleep until I can access my funds." "Then we understand each other." "Perfectly." They stood there sizing each other up like two cautious animals meeting on a narrow trail. Ramsay cleared his throat. "Well then, Clara, you got any belongings?" "Everything was in my trunk on the stagecoach. The robbers took it all." Her voice remained steady, but Rowan caught the slight tension in her jaw. "I have what I'm wearing and nothing else." "We'll get you sorted out," Ramsay said. "Mary at the general store might have some spare things. We'll work something out." "I can pay her back once. Don't worry about it now." The sheriff's voice was kind. "Rowan, you mind if I come by tomorrow? Need to get a full statement from Clara about what happened, who she saw." "Long as it's afternoon. I got work in the morning." They emerged into the purple dusk of early evening. The temperature had dropped with the sun, and Rowan noticed Clara suppress a shiver. She had no coat, he realized. The robbers had taken everything. Without speaking, he untied his horse and began walking down the street. After a moment, Clara fell into step beside him. "Your horse is beautiful," she said after a stretch of silence. "What's his name?" "Duke." "Fitting. He has a regal bearing." Rowan glanced at her, surprised by the observation. Most people saw Duke as just another horse, a tool for work. But Clara was right. There was something dignified in the way the big bay carried himself. "He do anything useful besides looking pretty?" Rowan asked, his tone neutral, but testing. "Besides carrying you and not bucking you off?" "I'd say that's fairly useful." Clara's voice carried the smallest hint of humor. "Though I suppose usefulness is subjective." They walked past the saloon, where light and noise spilled into the street. Several men lounged on the porch, and Rowan felt their eyes follow Clara. He moved slightly closer to her, a gesture he told himself was purely practical. "You know how to ride?" he asked. "Yes?" "City riding or real riding?" Now the amusement in her voice was unmistakable. "I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, Mr. Hale. I can ride, rope, and shoot. I can also cook, clean, and manage accounts. Will any of those skills make me less of an imposition?" "Just curious?" "No, you're trying to figure out if I'm going to be helpless and demanding." Clara stopped walking, forcing him to stop too. In the fading light, her eyes were serious. "I won't be. I don't cry easy, I don't expect to be entertained, and I can take care of myself. I just need a safe roof for a few nights. That's all." Rowan studied her face, looking for cracks in the composure. He found none. "Then we'll get along fine," he repeated. They continued in silence to the small house at the edge of town, a simple structure with a covered porch and a hitching post out front. Rowan had built it himself when he'd first come to Pine Hollow 8 years ago, before Martha got sick, before he'd inherited the small ranch outside town. He still kept the house for nights when he came to town for supplies or business. Inside, the house was neat but stark. A kitchen with a wood stove and a rough table. A sitting area with 2 chairs that didn't match. A bookshelf with maybe a dozen volumes. 2 bedroom doors off the main room. "That one's yours," Rowan said, pointing to the door on the left. "Sheets are clean. There's a basin for washing. Outhouse is around back." Clara moved to the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. Truly, I know you didn't want to do this." Sheriff asked. "I said yes. That's all there is to it. Still, thank you." She disappeared into the room, closing the door softly behind her. Rowan stood in the empty kitchen, Duke's reins still in his hand, and wondered what the hell he'd just agreed to. The next morning arrived cold and bright. Rowan woke before dawn, as he always did, and dressed in the dark of his room. He expected Clara to still be sleeping. Most people slept late when they had the chance, especially after a trauma like a robbery. But when he emerged into the main room, the smell of coffee hit him first. Clara stood at the stove, tending a pot that bubbled with something that smelled like oatmeal. She'd somehow found one of Martha's old aprons. He'd forgotten those were even still here, and tied it over her wrinkled traveling dress. Her hair was already pinned up, and she looked like she'd been awake for some time. "Morning," she said without turning around. "I hope you don't mind. I couldn't sleep, and I found some oats in the pantry. Figured I should make myself useful." Rowan stood in the doorway of his room, completely thrown. "You didn't have to." "I know, but I wanted to." She poured coffee into 2 tin cups and brought one to the table. "I'm not good at sitting idle, never have been." He sat slowly, accepting the coffee. It was strong and hot, exactly how he liked it. "You find everything all right? Your pantry is impressively organized. Military background?" "No, just like things in order." "Me too." Claire returned to the stove, stirring the pot. "Chaos on the outside, order on the inside. That's what my father used to say." It was the first personal thing she'd volunteered. Rowan sipped his coffee and said nothing, waiting. "He died 2 years ago," Claire continued, her voice even. "Farm accident. Mother passed when I was 16. My brother—" She paused. "Cholera, last winter. I was traveling west to start fresh. Can't go back to Pennsylvania, sold the farm to pay debts. Sorry for your losses." "Thank you." She brought 2 bowls to the table and sat across from him. "What about you? Sheriff mentioned someone named Martha." "My sister. She came out here with me 8 years ago. Got sick 3 winters back, didn't make it." Claire's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry, that's a hard loss." "Life's full of them." They ate in silence for a moment. The oatmeal was good, better than Rowan usually made for himself. "Sheriff's coming by around noon," Rowan said, "to take your statement. I'll be ready. I got a good look at 3 of them. The one who held the gun on us had a scar across his left cheek. Another had a tattoo on his wrist, looked like a snake. The third stayed on his horse, but he had a distinctive hat, brown leather with silver conchos." Rowan looked up, impressed despite himself. "Most people panic during a robbery, don't notice details." "Panicking doesn't change anything. Might as well pay attention." Clara met his eyes. "Besides, I'd like those men caught. They took my mother's ring, only thing I had left of her." There was steel beneath the calm surface, Rowan realized. Clara Merrick had been tested by life and hadn't broken. He recognized it because he saw the same thing in his own mirror every morning. "Ramsey's a good lawman. If they can be caught, he'll catch them." "I hope so." After breakfast, Clara insisted on washing the dishes. Rowan let her, partly because arguing seemed like more trouble than it was worth, and partly because he needed to check on Duke and prepare for the ride back to his ranch. He had cattle to tend and a fence that needed mending. He was in the small stable behind the house, checking Duke's hooves, when Clara appeared in the doorway. "I found these in the chest in my room," she said, holding up a folded set of clothes. "They look like they might have belonged to your sister. Would you mind if I wore them? My dress is filthy, and I can't exactly wash it while wearing it." The clothes were Martha's. A simple cotton blouse and split riding skirt she'd worn when helping with ranch work. Rowan felt a sharp pang seeing them, but he pushed it down. "She'd have wanted them used," he said shortly. "Thank you." Clara hesitated. "There's also a hat and some boots. I'm hoping they fit well enough. If you're riding out to your ranch, I'd like to come with you." Rowan straightened up, frowning. "Why?" "Because sitting in that house all day will drive me mad. Because I told you I'm not helpless, and I meant it. Because—" She paused, and for the first time he saw a crack in her composure. "Because if I sit still too long, I'll start thinking about everything I lost, and I can't afford to break down right now. I need to stay busy." He understood that. God, did he understand that. "You ever done ranch work?" "I told you, I grew up on a farm. Cattle, crops, the whole thing. I can pull my weight. It's a hard ride, 5 miles across rough country. I can handle it." Rowan studied her for a long moment. Everything in him said to refuse, to keep this temporary arrangement as distant as possible. But there was something in her eyes, a desperate need to be useful, to matter, that he recognized all too well. Be ready in 20 minutes. And Miss Merrick? Out there, you do exactly what I say, when I say it. Understood? Understood, Mr. Hale. 20 minutes later, Clara emerged wearing Martha's clothes. The fit wasn't perfect. Martha had been shorter and rounder, but Clara had cinched the skirt with a belt and tucked the blouse in efficiently. The boots were slightly large, but she'd stuffed them with cloth. The wide-brimmed hat shadowed her face. She looked like she belonged here, Rowan thought, then immediately dismissed the idea. He'd saddled Martha's old mare, Daisy, a gentle paint horse who hadn't been ridden much since Martha died. Clara approached the horse calmly, letting Daisy sniff her hand before running her palm down the mare's neck. "Hello, beautiful," she murmured. "We're going to be friends, aren't we?" Daisy nickered softly, and Rowan felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. The mare had been Martha's favorite, had grieved visibly after Martha's death, standing for hours in her stall with her head hanging low. Now here she was responding to Clara's touch, like she remembered what it felt like to be loved. "Mount up," Rowan said, his voice rougher than he intended. Clara swung into the saddle with practiced ease, settling herself and gathering the reins with the confidence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Another surprise. They rode out of Pine Hollow as the morning sun climbed higher, painting the landscape in harsh, beautiful light. The land stretched out in rolling hills covered with sage and buffalo grass, broken by rocky outcroppings and stands of juniper. In the distance, the mountains rose like serrated teeth against the sky. Rowan set a steady pace, and Clara kept up without complaint. She rode well, not fancy, but competent and comfortable. She didn't chatter or ask questions, just rode in silence, taking in the landscape with what looked like genuine appreciation. They'd been riding for about an hour when Clara finally spoke. "It's beautiful out here. Harsh, but beautiful. It's hard country, kills the weak and wears down the strong." "Like everywhere, then." Clara's voice was thoughtful. "Pennsylvania could be just as brutal. Different dangers, maybe, but just as deadly. At least here, you can see what's coming." Rowan glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "Back east, threats hide behind polite society. Men smile while plotting to take your land. Women befriend you while spreading rumors. Everything's buried under layers of false civility." She gestured at the open landscape. "Here, if something wants to kill you, it doesn't pretend to be your friend first. I appreciate the honesty." Despite himself, Rowan felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Never thought of it that way. Most people don't. They just see the emptiness and call it lonely. But there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Is there? Of course. You can be alone and content. You can be surrounded by people and feel utterly isolated. Clara adjusted her seat in the saddle. "Which are you, Mr. Hale?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you think I'm either?" "Because we're the same, you and I. We've both lost people we loved. We've both learned that caring hurts. So we tell ourselves we're fine alone, that we don't need anyone. But there's a difference between not needing anyone and being afraid to need anyone." "You don't know anything about me." "Don't I?" Clara's voice was gentle but persistent. "You live alone, you work alone. You clearly avoid getting close to anyone. You agreed to let me stay only because the sheriff guilted you into it, and you're counting the hours until I leave. Not because you actually mind my presence, but because you're terrified of getting used to having someone around again." Rowan's jaw tightened. "You're making a lot of assumptions, Miss Merrick." "I'm observing, and I'm right, aren't I?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. They rode in silence for another 20 minutes before his ranch came into view. It was a modest spread, a small house, a barn, a few corrals, and grazing land that stretched toward the foothills. Nothing fancy, but it was his, bought with money he'd saved from years of hard work. As they approached, Rowan noticed something wrong. The gate to the main corral stood open, swinging slightly in the wind. He always closed that gate. Always. "Stay here," he said sharply. "What's wrong?" "Gate's open. Might be nothing. Might be something." Clara's hand moved to her waist, and Rowan realized she was reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. If it's something, you shouldn't go alone. I said stay here. But as he dismounted and approached the corral, Clara followed on foot, leading Daisy. Stubborn woman. The corral was empty. 6 head of cattle that should have been there were gone. Rowan felt cold fury settle over him as he scanned the area. Tracks in the dust showed where the cattle had been driven out and headed north. Rustlers, he said flatly. How long ago? Tracks are fresh. Maybe an hour, 2 at most. He swung back into Duke's saddle. I'm going after them. I'm coming with you. The hell you are. Go back to the house, lock the doors. And do what? Wait for you to come back? What if they circle around? What if there are more of them? Clara's voice was sharp with logic. You need someone watching your back, and I'm here. Unless you think I'm useless? I think you're a civilian who's already been through 1 robbery this week. And I think I'm someone who knows how to handle herself and isn't going to hide while you ride into potential danger alone. Clara met his glare without flinching. Your choice, Mr. Hale. Waste time arguing with me or let me come along and maybe actually catch these thieves before they disappear with your cattle. Rowan wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at him to send her back, to keep her safe, to not risk anyone else. But the tracks were getting older by the minute, and she was right. Having someone at his back might make the difference. You stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. And if shooting starts, you get the hell out. Understood? Understood. They rode north at a hard gallop, following the tracks through sage and scrub. The trail was clear. Whoever had taken his cattle wasn't trying to hide their path. That meant either they were stupid or they didn't care about being followed. Neither option was good. After 30 minutes of hard riding, Rowan spotted movement ahead. 3 riders, driving his 6 cattle toward a narrow canyon. He pulled Duke up short, and Clara stopped beside him. That's them, he said quietly. 3 men, armed. Clara studied them through narrowed eyes. The one on the left, brown hat with silver conchos. That's one of the men who robbed the stagecoach. Rowan's blood went cold. You sure? Positive. I told you I got a good look. Her voice was tight. They followed us. They knew where we'd be. Why would stagecoach robbers bother with cattle rustling? Maybe they recognized me. Maybe they're trying to cover their tracks. Clara's hands tightened on Daisy's reins. What do we do? Rowan was already reaching for his rifle. We get my cattle back. You circle around to that outcropping on the right. Stay hidden. If they try to run that direction, fire a shot in the air, not at them, just scare them back toward me. Can you do that? Yes. If they start shooting at you, I'll get out. I'm not brave, Mr. Hale, just stubborn. Despite everything, Rowan almost smiled. That's the smart kind of stubborn. Go! Clara wheeled Daisy around and headed for the outcropping at a careful trot, keeping low and using the terrain for cover. Rowan waited until she was in position, then spurred Duke forward. Those are my cattle, he called out, his voice carrying across the distance. You're going to leave them here and ride on, or this is going to get ugly. The 3 rustlers turned in their saddles. The one with the silver concho's hat laughed. That's so. You and what army, cowboy? Don't need an army, just need you to be smart. Smart would be you turning around and forgetting you saw anything. The man's hand moved toward his gun. We don't want trouble, but we ain't afraid of it either. Rowan's rifle was already in his hands. Last chance. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but felt like hours. The rustler with the hat went for his gun. Rowan fired first, not to kill, but to wound. The shot caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. The other 2 rustlers scattered, one heading toward the canyon, the other back the way they'd come. The one heading back suddenly changed direction as a shot cracked from the outcropping where Clara waited. The rustler cursed and veered back toward Rowan, who fired again, this time hitting the man's horse in the rump. Not a killing shot, but enough to send the animal bucking and dumping its rider hard on the ground. The 3rd rustler made it to the canyon mouth and disappeared. Rowan let him go. One escaped was better than a firefight where someone might get killed. The wounded rustlers stumbled to their feet, hands raised. The one with the conchos clutched his bleeding shoulder, his face twisted with pain and rage. You're going to regret this, he spat. I doubt it. Rowan kept his rifle trained on them. Miss Merrick, you can come out now. Clara emerged from behind the rocks, still mounted on Daisy. a rifle in her hands that Rowan hadn't even known she'd taken from his saddle scabbard. Smart woman. When she got close enough to see the wounded rustler's face clearly, her expression hardened. That's him. That's definitely one of the stagecoach robbers. The one who held the gun on us. The rustler's eyes widened with recognition and something that looked like fear. You're supposed to be in town. Change of plans, Clara said coldly. Rowan moved Duke closer, keeping his rifle steady. You boys are going to take a ride back to Pine Hollow with us. Sheriff's going to be real interested to talk to you. We ain't going nowhere with you. Then you're going to bleed out right here. Your choice. The rustler with the shoulder wound looked at his companion, who was still nursing a twisted ankle from the fall. Neither of them looked ready for more fighting. Fine, the wounded one finally said, but this ain't over. Pretty sure it is, Rowan gestured with his rifle. Now mount up, slowly, and right ahead of us. Any funny business, and I won't aim for your shoulder next time. It was late afternoon by the time they reached Pine Hollow, driving the recovered cattle before them and herding the two captured rustlers like reluctant sheep. Sheriff Ramsey met them at his office, his eyebrows rising at the sight. Rowan, Miss Merrick, what happened? Caught these two stealing my cattle, Rowan said. Miss Merrick identified one of them as being part of the gang that robbed the stagecoach. Ramsey's expression sharpened. That's so? He looked at Clara. You sure? Absolutely certain. The one with the wounded shoulder. He's the man who held the gun on us. I'd recognize him anywhere. The rustler glared at her but said nothing as Ramsey pulled him off his horse and into the jail. His companion followed with resignation, and soon both men were locked in the holding cells. The third one got away, Rowan said, headed north into the canyon. I'll get a posse together, track him down. Ramsey wiped his brow. You two did good work today. Risky, but good. Miss Merrick spotted him first, and she backed me up when it mattered. Ramsey looked at Clara with new respect. You all right, ma'am? That's 2 dangerous situations in 2 days. I'm fine, Sheriff. Clara's voice was steady, but Rowan noticed the slight tremor in her hands now that the adrenaline was fading. Just glad we caught them. Well, you just earned yourself a reward. These boys are wanted for more than just your robbery. Territory's been offering $300 for information leading to their capture. That money's yours. Clara's eyes widened. $300? That's right. Might take a week or 2 to process, but it's coming to you. Rowan saw the relief wash over her face. $300 was more than enough for her to continue her journey west, to start fresh wherever she was heading. It was also enough that she didn't need to stay in Pine Hollow anymore. Thank you, Sheriff, Clara said quietly. That's more than I hoped for. You earned it. Ramsey turned to Rowan. I'll keep these boys locked up tight. Thanks for bringing them in. Rowan nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The ride, the confrontation, the tension, it had all caught up with him at once. Come on, he said to Clara. Let's get you back to the house. You've had enough excitement for one day. They walked through town in the fading light, leading their horses. The streets were busy with evening activity, people heading to the saloon, the restaurant, the general store before it closed. Several folks nodded to them, and Rowan caught more than one curious glance directed at Clara. Town's going to be talking about you, he said. Let them talk. I'm used to it. Clara's voice was weary. Besides, I'll be gone soon enough. The reward money means I can continue my journey. I won't need to impose on your hospitality much longer. Something uncomfortable twisted in Rowan's chest. Right, that's good. Yes. Good. They reached his house as full dark descended. Rowan tended to the horses while Clara went inside. When he entered the main room a few minutes later, he found her standing at the window, staring out at nothing. You should eat something, he said. I'm not hungry. She didn't turn around. But thank you. Clara. She turned at the sound of her first name. He hadn't used it before. Her face was pale in the lamplight, her composure finally cracking. I'm fine, she said, but her voice betrayed her. You're not, and that's okay. I can't afford not to be fine. The words came out sharp and fierce. I can't afford to break down, to cry, to be weak. I have to keep moving forward because if I stop, if I let myself feel everything I've lost... Her voice broke, and suddenly she was crying, great silent sobs that shook her shoulders. Rowan stood frozen for a moment, every instinct screaming at him to walk away, to let her have her privacy, to not get involved. But he couldn't do it. Not when she was hurting like this. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against his chest, crying into his shirt while he stood there awkwardly, one hand hovering over her back before finally settling there, offering what comfort he could. "It's all right," he said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. "You're safe. It's all right." They stood like that for several minutes, her crying and him holding her, until finally the storm passed. Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize. You've been through hell this week. You're allowed to break down." She laughed, a watery sound. "I pride myself on not breaking down." "Pride's overrated," says the man who's built his whole life around it. Rowan felt his mouth twitch. "Maybe we're both stubborn fools." "Maybe." Clara took a shaky breath. "Thank you. For today. For everything. You didn't have to help me, but you did. Sheriff asked me to, no. I mean really help me. You could have left me in town, could have refused to let me come to the ranch, could have told me to hide while you went after those rustlers alone. But you didn't. You treated me like I mattered." The words hit harder than they should have. Rowan looked at this woman who'd stumbled into his life 2 days ago, this stranger who somehow already felt like less of a stranger, and felt something shift inside him, like a door he'd thought was sealed forever creaking open, just a crack. "You do matter," he said quietly. Clara's eyes met his, searching for something. Whatever she saw made her smile, sad and small, but genuine. "So do you, Rowan Hale, even if you don't believe it." The morning after Clara's breakdown brought a subtle shift in the air between them, like the first thaw after a long winter. Rowan woke to find her already in the kitchen again, but this time, when their eyes met over coffee, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that they'd crossed some invisible line from strangers tolerating each other's presence to something more complicated. "I thought I'd ride out to the ranch with you again today," Clara said, setting a plate of eggs in front of him. "If you don't mind. I know the 3 days are almost up, but the reward money won't come through until next week, and I'd rather be useful than sit here going mad with boredom." Rowan had been dreading this conversation, though he couldn't quite articulate why. "You don't owe me anything, Clara. You can rest if you need to." "I don't need to rest. I need to work." She sat across from him with her own plate. "Besides, those cattle aren't going to tend themselves, and you said yourself you have a fence that needs mending. I'm good with fence work." "It's hard labor." "So is everything worth doing?" Clara took a bite of eggs, chewing thoughtfully. "Unless you don't want me there. If that's the case, just say so. I won't be offended." But that was the problem. He did want her there, and that scared him more than any rustler ever could. Still, turning her down would require an explanation he wasn't ready to give. "Be ready in 20 minutes, he said instead. The ride out to the ranch felt different in the morning light. Clara rode beside him rather than behind, and they fell into an easy silence that didn't need filling. The land stretched out around them, vast and indifferent, but somehow less lonely with her presence. When they arrived, Rowan showed Clara where the fence line ran along the eastern pasture. Several posts had rotted through, and the wire sagged dangerously low in places. Left unattended, his cattle could wander off, or predators could get in. "We'll need to pull the old posts, dig new holes, set fresh timber, and restring the wire," he explained, gathering tools from the barn. "It's sweaty work, and you'll have blisters by noon." Clara accepted the pair of work gloves he handed her. "Then I'll have blisters. Won't be the first time." They worked in tandem through the morning, and Rowan found himself continually surprised by her competence. Clara wielded the post-hole digger with practiced efficiency, didn't complain when splinters found their way through the gloves, and understood instinctively how to keep the wire taut while he secured it. She worked like someone who'd spent her life doing hard labor, not like a woman who'd recently lost everything. Around mid-morning, as they paused to drink from the canteen, Clara broke the comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something personal?" Rowan tensed. "Depends on the question." "Why did you come to Wyoming? You don't strike me as someone who was born to ranch life." He was quiet for a long moment, considering whether to answer. But she'd been honest with him about her losses, and somehow that seemed to demand reciprocity. I was a carpenter back in Missouri, had a good business, a wife I loved, a daughter. The words came out flat, practiced, like a story he'd told himself so many times it had lost its emotional weight. Fire took them both. House burned down while I was at a job site. They said it was quick, that they didn't suffer, but I don't know if that's true or just something people say. Claire's face softened with understanding. How long ago? 9 years. I sold everything, took Martha, she was widowed herself, and came west. Figured I'd outrun the memories. He laughed bitterly. Turns out grief travels light. I'm sorry, Rowan. That's a terrible loss. Life's full of them, he said, echoing his words from their first morning together. You learn to live with it, or you don't. What are you doing? The question caught him off guard. What? Are you living with it, or are you just existing alongside it? Clara's gray-blue eyes were gentle but persistent. Because there's a difference. I'm surviving. That's enough. Is it? She didn't wait for an answer, instead turning back to the fence line. Come on, this post isn't going to set itself. They worked in silence after that, but Rowan couldn't shake her question. Was he living or just existing? For 9 years he'd told himself that survival was enough, that asking for more was greedy given what he'd lost. But watching Clara work beside him, hearing her occasional humming as she focused on a particularly stubborn post, he wondered if maybe he'd been wrong. By noon, they'd replaced 6 posts and restrung 50 yards of fence. Clara's face was flushed from exertion, her hair escaping its pins and damp tendrils, and there was a smudge of dirt across her cheek. She looked alive in a way that made Rowan's chest ache. We should eat, he said abruptly. There's a spot by the creek that's shaded. They rode to a stand of cottonwoods where a narrow creek burbled over smooth stones. Rowan had packed bread, cheese, and some dried apples. Simple fare, but Clara accepted it gratefully. This place is beautiful, she said, settling on a flat rock near the water. Peaceful. Martha used to love it here. Said it reminded her of a spot back in Missouri where we used to play as kids. Rowan sat a respectful distance away, though part of him wanted to sit closer. After she died, I stopped coming. Seemed wrong to enjoy it without her. She'd probably hate that you stopped. You didn't know her. No, but I know what it's like to be the one who dies. Clara's voice was thoughtful. Not literally, obviously, but I've thought about what I'd want if I was gone. I wouldn't want the people I loved to stop living. I'd want them to remember me by living harder, fuller, better than they did when I was alive. That's easy to say when you're not the one left behind. Is it? Because I am the one left behind, Rowan. Everyone I loved is gone. My parents, my brother, my home, all of it, gone. I could stop living. I could find a quiet corner somewhere and just exist until death catches up with me. But what would that honor? What would that prove? She turned to face him fully. The people we lost don't want us to stop living. They want us to live enough for both of us. Rowan felt something crack inside his chest, a hairline fracture in the wall he'd built around his heart. It's not that simple. Nothing ever is. But it's true anyway. Clara bit into an apple, her gaze distant. When my brother died, I was so angry. Angry at God, at fate, at the universe for being so cruel. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, just sat in his empty room waiting to feel something other than rage and grief. What changed? My neighbor, old woman named Mrs. Kettering, came by one day, found me sitting there in the dark. You know what she said? Clara smiled at the memory. She said, grief is love with nowhere to go, child. You can let it poison you, or you can let it transform you, but you can't let it stop you. Wise woman. She was. She'd buried 3 husbands and 2 children. If anyone knew about grief, it was her. Clara's voice softened. She told me that every day I wasted in that dark room was a day my brother couldn't have, that he'd lived 24 years and wanted 40 more, and the least I could do was live hard enough for both of us. Rowan was quiet, turning her words over in his mind. Did it help? Thinking of it that way? Eventually. Not right away, but eventually. Clara met his eyes. I'm still learning how to do it, but I'm trying. That's more than I was doing before. They sat in silence as the creek babbled and a breeze rustled through the cottonwood leaves. Rowan felt something shifting inside him, some long frozen part of himself beginning to thaw despite his best efforts to keep it numb. "We should get back to work," he said finally, standing and brushing dirt from his pants. Clara stood too, but before they could return to the horses, she touched his arm gently. "Thank you for telling me about your family. I know it wasn't easy. You told me about yours first. Still, thank you." Her hand lingered for a moment before falling away, and Rowan found himself missing the warmth of it. They worked through the afternoon, finishing the fence line as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Claire's hands were blistered despite the gloves, but she never complained, just kept working with steady determination. As they loaded the tools back into the barn, Rowan caught her flexing her fingers and wincing. "Let me see," he said. "I'm fine." "Clara." She sighed and held out her hands. The blisters were angry and red, some of them already weeping. Rowan felt a surge of guilt. He should have made her stop earlier, should have been paying closer attention. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into the small ranch house. He returned with a tin of salve and clean cloth strips. "This'll help." Clara watched as he gently applied the salve to her damaged palms, his rough hands surprisingly careful. The intimacy of the gesture wasn't lost on either of them. Rowan could feel the weight of her gaze on his bowed head, the softness of her skin under his calloused fingers. "You're good at this," she said quietly. "Had practice. Martha was always getting hurt doing things she shouldn't have been doing." The memory brought a small smile. "Stubborn woman. Reminds me of someone." "I'm not stubborn. I'm determined. There's a difference." "Is there?" Rowan echoed her earlier question back to her, earning a soft laugh. He wrapped her hands in the cloth strips, tying them off securely. "That should help. Don't get them wet tonight." "Yes, doctor." Claire's tone was teasing, but her eyes were serious. "Thank you for taking care of me. You helped me today. It's only fair." "Is that the only reason?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. Rowan released her hands and stepped back, putting safe distance between them. "We should head back to town. It'll be dark soon." The ride back was quieter than the ride out, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they reached town, the streets were busy with evening activity. As they passed the saloon, a man stepped out onto the porch, and Clara went rigid in her saddle. "That's him," she said, her voice tight. "The third rustler, the one who got away." Rowan followed her gaze to a lean man with a scarred face, currently lighting a cigarette. "You sure?" "Positive. I saw him clearly when he rode into the canyon." The man looked up at that moment and locked eyes with Clara. Recognition and alarm flashed across his face, and he bolted, disappearing into the alley between the saloon and the general store. "Stay here," Rowan said, already dismounting. But Clara was right behind him, ignoring his order as she'd ignored several others. They ran into the alley together, but the rustler had already reached his horse tied at the back of the building. He swung into the saddle and spurred the animal hard, racing toward the edge of town. Sheriff Ramsey emerged from his office as the commotion drew his attention. "What's happening?" "Third rustler," Rowan called out, "heading north." Ramsey didn't hesitate. "I'll get a posse together." "Rowan, you coming?" Rowan looked at Clara, torn between the desire to chase down the criminal and the need to make sure she was safe. She read his hesitation and shook her head. "Go. I'll be fine. I'll lock myself in the house and wait for you." "Clara? I'm not helpless, remember? I can handle a few hours alone." Her bandaged hands touched his arm briefly. "Go catch him." Ramsey was already gathering men, 4 townsmen who could ride and shoot. Rowan mounted Duke, every instinct screaming at him to stay with Clara, but duty pulled him in the opposite direction. "Lock the doors," he said. "Don't open them for anyone but me or the sheriff." "I will. Be careful." He wanted to say something more, something about how the thought of her in danger made his chest tight with fear, but there was no time. The posse rode out at a hard gallop, following the tracks north into the darkness. They chased the rustler for 2 hours, following his trail by moonlight and instinct. Finally, they cornered him in a box canyon with no way out. The man surrendered without a fight, his horse exhausted and himself clearly resigned to his fate. "Looks like your luck ran out," Ramsey said as he put the man in irons. "Luck ran out the day I hit that stagecoach," the rustler muttered. "That woman's got eyes like a hawk." Rowan felt a surge of protective pride. "That woman helped put you and your friends behind bars. Show some respect." They rode back to Pine Hollow near midnight, the captured rustler tied to his saddle and flanked by armed men. Ramsey took custody of the prisoner, locking him up with his two companions. "That's all three of them," the sheriff said with satisfaction. "Good work tonight, gentlemen." The posse dispersed, heading home to their families in warm beds. Rowan rode to his house on the edge of town, exhaustion pulling at him, but anxiety pushing him forward. He needed to see that Clara was safe. The house was dark, except for a single lamp burning in the window. Rowan dismounted and tried the door, locked as he'd instructed. He knocked softly. "Clara, it's Rowan." He heard movement inside, then the sound of the bolt sliding back. The door opened, and Clara stood there in Martha's nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders, relief evident on her face. "You caught him?" "We caught him. He's locked up with the others." Rowan stepped inside, and Clara immediately bolted the door behind him. "You all right?" "I'm fine. Worried about you, but fine." She studied his face in the lamplight. "You look exhausted." "Long night." "There's coffee if you want it. I kept it warm." They sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee in the quiet hours past midnight. Rowan told her about the chase and capture, and Clara listened with the kind of focused attention that made him feel like his words actually mattered. "I'm glad you're safe," she said when he finished. "All of you. You should get some rest. It's late." But neither of them moved. The intimacy of the hour, the shared danger and relief, created a bubble of connection that neither seemed willing to break. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about what you asked me, about whether I'm living or just existing." "You don't have to." "I want to." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, staring into its depths. "I think I've been existing, going through the motions, surviving, but not really living. Not since my brother died. Maybe not since my father died, if I'm honest. There's no shame in that, isn't there? I've spent 2 years telling myself I was fine, that I was handling things, that I was strong, but really, I was just numb, just getting from one day to the next without feeling anything too deeply." She looked up, her eyes bright in the lamplight. "And then I came here, and you're doing the same thing. We're both just existing alongside our grief instead of living with it." Rowan felt exposed, like she'd seen through every defense he'd spent years building. "Maybe that's all we can do." "No," Claire's voice was firm. "No, I don't believe that. Mrs. Kettering was right. Grief is love with nowhere to go, but maybe it doesn't have to have nowhere to go. Maybe we can redirect it, transform it into something else." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but I think—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think maybe we could figure it out together." The implications of what she was suggesting hung in the air between them. Rowan's heart hammered in his chest as he met her gaze. "Clara, you're leaving as soon as that reward money comes through. You said yourself you're heading west to start fresh." "I could start fresh here." "You don't know what you're saying. You've been through trauma, the robbery, the rustlers, everything. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 2 years. Clara leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Rowan, I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I also know that I feel more alive working beside you on that fence line than I have since my father died. I know that this place, this harsh, honest, beautiful place, it feels like somewhere I could belong." "What about me?" The question came out rougher than he intended. "What about the fact that everyone I care about ends up dead or gone? What about the fact that I'm already here? That I already care?" Clara's voice was gentle but unyielding. "You can't protect yourself from loss by refusing to live, Rowan. All you do is lose differently, slower, but just as completely." He wanted to argue, to list all the reasons why this was impossible, why he couldn't let himself care about her, why she should run as far from him as possible, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, He just sat there, staring at this woman who'd crashed into his carefully controlled life and threatened to upend everything. "I don't know how to do this," he finally admitted. "I don't know how to let someone in again." "Neither do I, but maybe we could learn together." Clara reached across the table, her bandaged hand covering his scarred one. "I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I'm just asking for a chance. Let me stay a little longer. Let's see what happens." Rowan looked at their joined hands, hers small and damaged from today's work, his large and calloused from years of labor. Two broken people reaching for each other in the darkness. It terrified him. But the alternative, watching her leave, returning to his empty house, an emptier life, terrified him more. "The reward money," he said slowly. "When it comes through, you could use it to buy supplies. Stay at the ranch, help with the work. I could pay you a fair wage for the labor." Clara's smile was soft and knowing. "That sounds practical and reasonable." "It is practical and reasonable. It's also an excuse for both of us to pretend we're not taking a risk on something neither of us understands yet. Is that a problem?" "No." Her thumb brushed across his knuckles, a whisper of touch that sent heat through his entire body. "I think it's perfect." They sat there for a long moment, hands joined, the weight of unspoken possibilities settling around them like snow. Finally, Rowan stood, gently releasing her hand. "You should get some rest. We have work tomorrow." "We do." Clara stood as well, but before he could retreat to his room, she stepped close and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you, Rowan, for giving this a chance." She disappeared into her room before he could respond, leaving him standing alone in the kitchen, his cheek burning where her lips had touched, his heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next few days fell into a pattern that felt both comfortable and charged with unacknowledged tension. They rode out to the ranch each morning, worked side by side through the day, and returned to town each evening. Clara's hands healed, developing new calluses that spoke of labor and commitment. Rowan found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing stories about Martha and his life before Wyoming, listening as Clara opened up about her childhood in Pennsylvania. The town noticed, of course. Pine Hollow was too small for anything to go unnoticed. Rowan caught the knowing looks from shopkeepers, the whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. But he found he didn't care as much as he thought he would. Let them talk. He'd spent 9 years not caring what people thought. He wasn't going to start now. On the 5th day after Clara's arrival, Sheriff Ramsey came by the ranch while they were mending a section of the barn roof. "Afternoon," he called up to them. "Got news about that reward money." Clara climbed down the ladder, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Already? I thought it would take weeks." Territory Marshal happened to be in the area, heard about the capture and expedited the paperwork. Ramsey handed her an envelope. $300 as promised, plus another $100 for the capture of the third rustler. Clara's eyes widened. $400? You earned it. Those boys were wanted for a string of robberies across 3 territories. The sheriff tipped his hat. "You planning on staying in Pine Hollow, Miss Merrick, or continuing your journey west?" "I haven't decided yet," Clara said, but her eyes flicked to Rowan on the roof. Ramsey caught the look and smiled. "Well, take your time deciding. Town could use someone with your particular talents. Not many folks can identify criminals that quick and keep their head in a crisis." After the sheriff left, Clara stood staring at the envelope in her hands. $400 was enough to go anywhere, do anything. Start a new life in California or Oregon. Buy land, open a business, disappear into anonymity. "You should go inside, count it," Rowan said from the roof, his voice carefully neutral. "Make sure it's all there." Clara looked up at him, shading her eyes against the sun. "Do you want me to leave?" The question was direct, demanding an honest answer. Rowan climbed down the ladder, standing in front of her with sawdust in his hair and uncertainty in his eyes. "No," he said simply, "but I don't want you to stay out of obligation or because you think you owe me something." "I don't feel obligated. I feel—" She searched for the right word. "I feel like I found something I didn't know I was looking for. Does that make sense?" "Yeah." His voice was rough. "Yeah, it does. So I'd like to stay, if the offer still stands. I can pay room and board now, contribute to supplies." "I don't want your money, Clara." Then what do you want?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Rowan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered against her cheek, and she leaned into the touch like a flower turning toward the sun. "I want you to stay because you want to stay," he said quietly. "Not because it's practical or convenient, because you want to be here." "I do want to be here." Clara's hand came up to cover his. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time." He kissed her then, soft and tentative, like he was afraid she might break or disappear. Clara responded with a gentle pressure of her own, her free hand fisting in his shirt to pull him closer. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and loss pouring into it from both sides, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Well," Clara said shakily, "that's one way to seal an agreement." Rowan laughed, the sound surprising them both. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. Really laughed. Not just a bitter chuckle at life's cruelties. But Clara made him laugh, made him feel, made him want to be more than just a man surviving. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "Let's finish this roof. Then I'll show you the rest of the property. If you're staying, you should know what you're getting into." They worked together through the afternoon, and Rowan found himself narrating the history of the ranch as they moved from task to task. He showed her where he planned to expand the herd next spring, the section of creek where the water ran deepest, the old line shack he'd been meaning to repair. "It's not much," he said as the sun began to set. "But it's mine. Built it from nothing." "It's beautiful," Clara said, and he could tell she meant it. "It's honest, like you." That night, they stayed at the ranch instead of riding back to town. It felt like crossing another threshold, choosing to be here together in the place that would become theirs. Rowan cooked a simple dinner while Clara set the table, and they ate while discussing plans for the ranch. Practical things like cattle rotation and hay storage, but also dreams like maybe getting a few chickens, planting a kitchen garden. "You ever think about having horses?" Clara asked. "Beyond just working stock?" "What do you mean?" "Breeding them, training them. There's good money in quality horses, and this land could support it." Her eyes lit up as she warmed to the idea. "You've got water, grass, and shelter. All you'd need is a good stallion and a few mares." Rowan considered it. "That's a long-term investment. Takes years to build a reputation." "Good thing we have time, then." The casual assumption of a shared future made his heart skip. "We do?" Clara met his eyes across the table. "I hope so." After dinner, they sat on the porch as darkness fell and stars emerged in impossible numbers. The night was cold but clear, and Rowan built a small fire in the stone pit he'd constructed for evenings like this. They sat close together on the bench he'd made from cottonwood logs, sharing warmth and comfortable silence. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Clara said suddenly. "Why?" "Because I want to know you, really know you, not just the parts you show the world." Rowan was quiet for a long time, watching the fire dance. Finally he spoke. "Sometimes I forget what my daughter looked like. Her face, I mean. I remember she had my wife's eyes, remember the sound of her laugh. But her face," his voice cracked. "It's been 9 years, and sometimes I can't picture her face anymore. And that terrifies me more than anything, because if I forget her face, what else will I forget? How do I honor their memory if I can't remember?" Clara's hand found his in the darkness. "You honor their memory by living, by being the man they loved, by opening your heart to possibility instead of closing it to pain." She squeezed his fingers. "And Rowan? Forgetting what someone looked like doesn't mean forgetting who they were or what they meant to you. The love is still there. It just takes different shapes." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, the grief would swallow me whole." They sat in silence, hands joined, watching the fire burn low. Finally, Clara spoke again. "My turn. Something I've never told anyone." She took a deep breath. "When my brother died, part of me was relieved. Not that he was gone. God, never that. But relieved that I didn't have to keep pretending everything was fine, that I could finally break down without someone depending on me to be strong." That doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't it? What kind of sister feels relieved when her brother dies? The kind who was drowning and finally got permission to come up for air. Rowan turned to face her. "Clara, You can't carry everyone else's burdens without putting down your own sometimes. That's not weakness, that's human. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Rowan felt something inside him settle into place, like a bone finally healing straight after being broken. They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, two broken people beginning to believe they might be able to make something whole together. The fire had burned down to embers when Clara finally lifted her head from Rowan's shoulder, her neck stiff from the angle, but her heart oddly light. The night had grown colder, their breath forming small clouds in the darkness, but neither had wanted to move and break the spell of peace that had settled over them. "We should get some sleep," Rowan said reluctantly. "Morning comes early on a ranch." "I'm learning that." Clara stood, stretching, and Rowan caught himself watching the way the firelight played across her features. "Thank you for tonight, for listening, for understanding." "Same to you." They went inside to their separate rooms, but Rowan lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering how his carefully ordered solitude had been upended so completely in less than a week. Clara Merrick had crashed into his life like a summer storm, and he was beginning to realize he didn't want the skies to clear. The next 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost dangerously domestic. Clara proved herself invaluable on the ranch, her farm background showing in everything from the efficient way she mucked stalls to her gentle handling of the cattle. She started a kitchen garden despite the late season, planted some herbs in pots by the kitchen window, and somehow made the Stark ranch house feel like a home. They talked more than Rowan had talked to anyone since Martha died. Clara had opinions on everything from politics to poetry, challenged him when she disagreed, and made him laugh with her dry observations about ranch life. She also knew when to let silence be enough, working beside him for hours without needing to fill the space with words. The town noticed the change in their arrangement. Clara had moved out to the ranch permanently, and though she maintained her own room and they were scrupulously proper in public, rumors spread like wildfire through Pine Hollow. Rowan found he didn't care. For the first time in 9 years, he was living instead of just existing, and no amount of gossip could diminish that. But peace on the frontier was always temporary. On a Tuesday morning in late September, Rowan rode into Pine Hollow for supplies, leaving Clara at the ranch to work on extending the chicken coop they'd started building. The town seemed quieter than usual, an undercurrent of tension in the air that made his shoulders tighten. Sheriff Ramsey stood outside his office, his face grim. When he saw Rowan, he waved him over with urgent purpose. "We got a problem," Ramsey said without preamble. "Jed Harker escaped last night." Rowan's blood went cold. Harker was the rustler Clara had identified, the one with the scarred face and the mean streak. He'd been the most vocal of the 3 prisoners, making threats and promising revenge during his brief incarceration. How? Someone slipped him a knife, cut through the bars. They were old, needed replacing. Ramsey's jaw was tight with anger and frustration. Happened sometime between midnight rounds and dawn. He's been gone at least 6 hours. Which direction? Don't know. Could be halfway to the territorial border by now, or he could be hiding close, waiting. The sheriff's eyes were serious. "Rowan, I need you to be careful." Harker made specific threats against Miss Merrick, said she'd pay for identifying him. Fear, sharp and immediate, cut through Rowan's chest. "Claire's at the ranch, alone." "Then you need to get back there, now." Ramsey was already moving toward his horse. "I'll round up a posse, but that'll take time. You go make sure she's safe." Rowan didn't wait for more. He swung into Duke's saddle and spurred the horse into a gallop, his heart hammering against his ribs. The 5 miles to the ranch had never felt longer. Every minute stretched into an eternity of worst-case scenarios playing through his mind. Clara surprised while working, unable to defend herself, hurt or worse because Rowan had left her alone. He should never have left her alone. The ranch came into view, and Rowan's eyes immediately scanned for anything wrong. The chicken coop stood partially finished, tools scattered around it. The barn door hung open, swaying slightly in the breeze. No sign of Clara. "Clara!" he shouted, dismounting before Duke had fully stopped. "Clara, where are you?" Silence answered him, broken only by the wind and the nervous shuffling of cattle in the near pasture. Rowan's hand went to the pistol at his hip as he approached the house, every sense on high alert. The front door was ajar. He'd closed it that morning. He always closed it. Rowan pushed the door open slowly, gun drawn, his breath coming in short, controlled bursts. The main room was empty but showed signs of disturbance. A chair knocked over, Clara's work gloves on the floor when she always hung them by the door. "Looking for someone, Cowboy?" The voice came from behind him, and Rowan spun to find Jed Harker standing in the doorway of Clara's room, one arm wrapped around her throat, a knife pressed to her side. Clara's eyes were wide but focused, her hands gripping Harker's arm as she struggled to breathe. "Let her go," Rowan said, his voice deadly calm despite the terror flooding his system. "This is between you and me." "No, this is between me and the bitch who put me in jail." Harker's scarred face twisted with malicious satisfaction. "She cost me weeks in that cell, cost me my freedom. Time to pay what she owes." "I don't owe you anything," Clara managed to gasp out. "You robbed me. You stole my mother's ring. And you took something more valuable, my liberty." The knife pressed harder, and Rowan saw Clara wince. "Now I'm taking something from you, fair trade." "Harker, think about this." Rowan kept his gun trained but couldn't risk a shot with Clara so close. "You kill her, you're a dead man. Every lawman in the territory will hunt you down. But let her go, ride out now, and you might make it to Mexico." "I'm already a dead man, Cowboy. They'll hang me for what I done either way." Harker's eyes were wild, desperate. "But at least I'll have the satisfaction of making her pay first." Clara's hand moved slightly, and Rowan caught the subtle shift in her weight. She was preparing something, waiting for an opening. He needed to keep Harker talking, give her whatever chance he could. "What do you want?" Rowan asked. "Money. Take whatever's here. Food, supplies, take it all. Just let her go." "I want justice. I want—" Clara moved fast, bringing her heel down hard on Harker's instep, while simultaneously driving her elbow back into his ribs. The knife sliced her side as Harker's grip loosened, but she twisted away, dropping to the floor and rolling toward the corner. Rowan fired. The shot caught Harker in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The outlaw's knife clattered to the floor as he stumbled, reaching for his own gun with his good hand. Rowan fired again, this time hitting Harker's gun arm. The outlaw collapsed against the wall, blood spreading across his shirt, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers. Rowan kicked the gun away and knelt beside Clara, who was pressing her hand to her bleeding side. "How bad?" he asked, his hands shaking as he gently moved hers to assess the wound. "Not deep," Clara said through gritted teeth. "Hurts like hell, but it's not deep." The knife had sliced through her shirt and left a long, angry cut across her ribs, but she was right. It wasn't deep enough to be life-threatening. Rowan pulled off his shirt and pressed it against the wound to slow the bleeding. "Keep pressure on it," he said, then turned to Harker, who was slumped against the wall, breathing hard and glaring at them with pure hatred. "You should have killed me," Harker spat. "Sheriff can do that legal after a trial." Rowan retrieved rope from the supply cupboard and bound Harker's hands behind his back, none too gently. "You're going back to jail. And this time, you won't be getting out." The sound of multiple horses approaching made Rowan tense, but then he heard Ramsey's voice calling out. The sheriff burst through the door with 4 armed men, taking in the scene with swift comprehension. "Everyone all right?" Ramsey asked. "Clara's hurt. Needs a doctor." Rowan was back at her side, his hands gentle despite the urgency. "Harker's alive." "Barely." 2 of the posse members hauled Harker to his feet and dragged him outside. Ramsey knelt beside Clara, his weathered face creased with concern. "Let me see." He examined the wound with practiced efficiency. "You're lucky. Another inch deeper and this would be serious. As is, you'll need stitches and rest." "I can ride," Clara said stubbornly. "You're not riding anywhere," Rowan said flatly. "We'll bring the doctor here." "Rowan's right," Ramsey agreed. "Pete, ride back and get Doc Morrison. Tell him it's urgent." One of the posse members nodded and rode off at a gallop. The sheriff turned back to them. "What happened here?" Rowan gave a brief account while keeping pressure on Clara's wound. Ramsey's expression darkened as he listened. "Someone in town helped him escape. Had to be. Those bars didn't cut themselves, and someone got him that knife." The sheriff's jaw was tight. "I'll find out who. In the meantime, I'm posting a guard on the jail. This won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," Rowan said, his voice carrying an edge that made Ramsey nod. After the sheriff and his men left with Harker, Rowan helped Clara to the bedroom and settled her on the bed, propping pillows behind her back so she could sit upright. She was pale, her breathing shallow with pain, but her eyes were clear and focused. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. For what? For not being more careful. I heard something outside, went to investigate. He grabbed me before I could get to the rifle. Clara, this isn't your fault. Rowan sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her. None of this is your fault. You did everything right. You fought back, created an opening. You probably saved both our lives. I should have been faster. You were plenty fast. He took her free hand, the one not pressed against the makeshift bandage. I'm the one who should apologize. I left you alone when I knew there was danger. I should have stayed or taken you with me, or... Rowan, Clara squeezed his hand. Stop. You couldn't have known he'd escape. You couldn't have known he'd come here. I should have protected you better. You did protect me. You came back. You saved me. Her voice softened. You always save me. The doctor arrived within the hour, a gruff older man named Morrison who'd been patching up frontier injuries for 30 years. He cleaned and stitched Clara's wound with efficient professionalism, gave her laudanum for the pain, and left instructions for keeping the wound clean and watching for infection. She'll be fine, Morrison told Rowan on his way out. Keep her quiet for a few days, make sure she doesn't reopen those stitches. And for God's sake, make sure she rests. These stubborn frontier women always try to do too much too soon. After the doctor left, Rowan sat in the chair he'd pulled beside Clara's bed, watching her drift in and out of sleep as the laudanum took effect. Every time she stirred or made a sound, his heart clenched with protective concern. He'd come so close to losing her today. If he'd been 5 minutes later, if Harker had been more skilled with that knife, if Clara hadn't been brave and quick thinking. He couldn't finish the thought. As darkness fell, Clara woke more fully, her eyes finding him in the lamplight. You're still here, she murmured. Where else would I be? Sleeping, eating, taking care of the ranch. She shifted slightly and winced. You don't have to watch over me like this. Yes, I do. Rowan, I almost lost you today, Clara. The words came out raw, stripped of his usual careful control. When I saw you with that knife at your throat, when I thought I might be too late, I can't lose you. I won't survive losing you. Clara reached for his hand, pulling him closer. You didn't lose me. I'm right here. But I could have. And the thought of it, the possibility, he broke off, struggling with emotions he'd kept locked away for years. I told myself I wouldn't care about anyone again, that it wasn't worth the risk of loss. But you came into my life and made me care anyway, made me want things I thought I'd buried with my family. What things? Her voice was soft, inviting. A future, a partner, someone to build something with instead of just surviving alone. Rowan met her eyes, letting her see the vulnerability he usually hid. I'm falling in love with you, Clara Merrick. Probably already fallen. And it terrifies me because I know how much it hurts to lose someone you love. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Then I guess it's good that I'm falling in love with you too, because at least we can be terrified together. He kissed her then, gentle and careful of her injury, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of lips and the caress of his hand against her cheek. When they broke apart, Clara was crying in earnest, but they were good tears, healing tears. Stay with me tonight, she whispered. I don't mean, just stay. I don't want to be alone. I'm not going anywhere, Rowan promised. He kicked off his boots and lay down on top of the covers beside her, careful not to jostle her injured side. Clara shifted closer, resting her head on his chest, and Rowan wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her like she was something precious and fragile. They lay like that as the lamp burned low, listening to each other breathe, two people who'd survived separate hells finding comfort in shared warmth. Rowan felt Clara relax against him, her breathing evening out as sleep claimed her again. He stayed awake, watching over her, silently promising that he would never let anyone hurt her again. The next morning brought Sheriff Ramsey back to the ranch, his expression troubled. How's Clara? He asked. Healing, resting. Rowan had been up since dawn, taking care of the morning chores so Clara wouldn't try to do it herself. What's wrong? Found out who helped Harker escape. Young fool named Danny Sykes works at the livery stable. Harker's cousin, turns out. Kid's barely 18, thought he was helping family. Ramsey shook his head. I got him locked up now, but that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? Because Danny's talking, trying to reduce his sentence. Says Harker had partners we don't know about. Says there's a whole gang working this territory, and the three we caught were just the visible part. The sheriff's voice was grim. Says they're planning something big in Pine Hollow, a bank job maybe, or hitting the assay office when the monthly gold shipment comes through. Rowan's jaw tightened. When? Danny doesn't know exact timing, but soon. Could be days, could be a week. Ramsey met his eyes. I'm putting together a proper defense. Need men who can shoot straight and keep their heads in a fight. You interested? Clara's hurt. I can't leave her. Bring her to town. She can stay with the Hendersons. Mary's been asking after her anyway. She'll be safer there than out here alone. The sheriff's expression was serious. Rowan, I need you. You're one of the best shots in the territory, and you kept your head during the Rustler situation. If this gang hits the town, I need every capable man I can get. Rowan looked back at the house, torn between duty and desire to protect Clara. But Ramsey was right. She'd be safer in town, surrounded by people, than out here where any outlaw could ride up and cause trouble. Let me talk to Clara first. He found her awake, sitting up in bed and looking mutinous about being confined there. When he explained the situation, her expression shifted from frustration to concern. You should help, she said immediately. The town needs you. Clara, I'll be fine. Mrs. Henderson makes excellent pie from what I hear, and I could use some female company. She touched his face gently. You can't protect me from everything, Rowan. And I won't let you stop living your life because you're worried about mine. I just got you. I'm not ready to risk losing you. Then don't lose. Clara's smile was small but fierce. Go be the hero this town needs. I'll be waiting when you get back. They rode into Pine Hollow that afternoon, moving slowly to accommodate Clara's injury. Mary Henderson welcomed Clara into her home with warm enthusiasm, settling her in the guest room and promising to take excellent care of her. Rowan felt the knot of anxiety in his chest loosen slightly, knowing Clara would be surrounded by good people. Over the next 3 days, Ramsey organized the town's defense. Rowan joined a dozen other men in planning strategic positions, checking weapons, and preparing for an attack that might never come. The tension in Pine Hollow grew thick enough to cut, everyone watching the horizon and jumping at sudden sounds. Clara chafed at her confinement in the Henderson house, but Mary proved to be a formidable guardian, refusing to let her do anything more strenuous than sit in the parlor and do needlework. Rowan visited every evening, sharing what information he could, and stealing precious minutes of normalcy in a situation that felt increasingly dangerous. On the 4th day, just after dawn, a rider came galloping into town. They're coming, gang of about 8 riders, heavily armed, heading straight for Pine Hollow. The town erupted into controlled chaos. Women and children were rushed into the church, which had thick stone walls and few windows. Men took up positions behind barricades Ramsey had ordered built across the main street. Rowan found himself positioned at the sheriff's office window, rifle ready, heart pounding with adrenaline and fear. Remember, Ramsey called out, we let them get into the kill zone before anyone fires. No shooting until I give the signal. We want them trapped, not scattered. Clara appeared at Rowan's side and his heart dropped. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the Hendersons. Mrs. Henderson is with the women and children. I'm here because I can shoot, and you need every gun you can get. Clara held up a rifle, her expression brooking no argument. Don't even try to send me away. We both know I won't go. There was no time to argue. The thunder of hooves announced the gang's arrival. 8 riders, as reported, rode into town with the arrogance of men who'd done this before. They split up with military precision, 4 heading toward the bank, 2 toward the assay office, 2 staying mounted as lookouts. Now! Ramsey's shout cracked like a whip. Gunfire erupted from a dozen positions, catching the outlaws completely by surprise. The 2 lookouts went down immediately, their horses rearing in panic. The men at the assay office dove for cover, returning fire wildly. The 4 at the bank tried to retreat but found themselves caught in a crossfire. One of the outlaws threw a torch through the bank's window, and flames immediately caught the interior. Smoke began billowing out as glass shattered from the heat. Fire! Someone shouted. The bank's on fire! Half the defenders broke position to fight the flames, and the outlaws used the chaos to make their move. 3 of them rushed the sheriff's office, laying down covering fire. Rowan took down one, Clara hit another in the leg, but the third burst through the door, his gun sweeping the room. Time seemed to slow. Rowan saw the outlaw's gun swing toward Clara, saw his finger tightening on the trigger. He threw himself in front of her without thinking, without hesitation, his only thought to protect her at any cost. The bullet hit him high in the chest, spinning him backward. He heard Clara scream, heard the boom of her rifle as she shot the outlaw point blank, heard bodies hitting the floor. Then everything went dark. He came to with Clara's face above his, her tears falling on his cheeks as she pressed her hands against his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. "Don't you dare," she was saying, her voice breaking. "Don't you dare leave me, Rowan Hale. Not now, not after everything." "Clara," his voice was weak, distant. "Save your strength. Doc Morrison's coming. You're going to be fine. You have to be fine." She was sobbing now, her blood-soaked hands trembling. "I love you. Do you hear me? I love you, and you don't get to leave me." Rowan tried to speak, to tell her he loved her too, but the darkness was pulling him under again. The last thing he saw was her face, fierce and terrified and beautiful, and he thought that if he had to die, at least it was protecting her. At least it meant something. The darkness that claimed Rowan was neither peaceful nor complete. He floated in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of sound and sensation like a drowning man grasping at driftwood. Clara's voice, hoarse from crying, begging him to hold on. Doc Morrison's gruff commands as he worked to extract the bullet. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with blood, pain sharp and all-consuming that made him want to surrender to the void. But every time he started to slip away, Clara's hand would tighten around his, and he'd force himself back toward the light. "Bullet went clean through," he heard Morrison say from somewhere far away. "Missed the lung by half an inch. Lucky son of a bitch, pardon my language, miss. But he's lost a lot of blood. Next few hours will tell the tale." "He's going to make it!" Clara's voice was fierce, absolute. "He has to make it!" Time became meaningless. Sometimes Rowan opened his eyes to find Clara sitting beside him, her face pale with exhaustion, dark circles under her eyes. Other times he woke to find the room empty except for the soft glow of lamplight. Once he surfaced to hear Mary Henderson arguing with Clara about something, their voices muted but insistent. "You need to rest, dear. You're still healing yourself." "I'm not leaving him." "You're no good to him if you collapse from exhaustion." "Then I'll collapse right here." Rowan tried to speak, to tell Clara that Mary was right, that she should rest, but his voice came out as nothing more than a rasp. Both women were at his side immediately, Clara's cool hand on his forehead, Mary adjusting pillows with practiced efficiency. "Rowan?" Clara's face swam into focus above him. "Can you hear me?" He managed a small nod, even that slight movement sending pain radiating through his chest. "Don't try to talk. You're at the Henderson house. You've been unconscious for 2 days." Her voice was steady now, controlled, but he could see the fear lurking in her eyes. "The doctor says you're going to be fine. You just need to rest and heal." 2 days. He'd lost 2 days. Rowan's mind struggled to piece together what had happened after he'd been shot. The gunfight, the fire, the outlaws. "The town?" he managed to rasp out. "Safe," Mary Henderson answered, appearing on his other side with a cup of water. "The gang's been dealt with. 5 dead, 3 captured. Sheriff Ramsey was wounded, but he'll recover. We lost 2 men, old Pete Sorensen and young Billy Crawford. The bank's damaged from the fire, but they saved most of it." Rowan felt relief wash through him. The town had survived. Clara had survived. That was what mattered. "You saved my life," Clara said softly. "That bullet was meant for me. You threw yourself in front of it without hesitation." He wanted to tell her that of course he had, that he'd do it again without question, that protecting her was as natural as breathing. But the words wouldn't come, exhaustion pulling at him like a riptide. "Rest now," Clara whispered, her lips brushing his forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up." The next time Rowan surfaced, sunlight was streaming through the window, suggesting at least another day had passed. His chest still ached, but the pain was more manageable now, less like being stabbed with hot iron and more like deep, constant pressure. He turned his head carefully and found Clara asleep in the chair beside his bed, her head pillowed on her arms on the edge of the mattress, one hand still clutching his. She looked exhausted, dark smudges under her eyes, her hair escaping its pins and messy tendrils. Her dress was the same one she'd been wearing during the gunfight. He could see the blood stains on the sleeves. His blood, most likely. How long had she been sitting there? How much had she neglected her own recovery to watch over his? Rowan carefully extracted his hand from hers and managed to brush a strand of hair from her face. The gentle touch woke her immediately, her head snapping up, eyes wide with alarm before focusing on him. "You're awake. Really awake." She leaned forward, searching his face. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot," Rowan said, his voice rough but stronger than before. "But alive. Thanks to you. Thanks to Doc Morrison. I just kept you from bleeding out until he got there." Clara's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes betrayed her emotion. "You scared me, Rowan. I thought, when you went down, I thought—" "I know." He reached for her hand again, lacing their fingers together. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for saving my life, you stubborn fool." But she was smiling through the tears that suddenly spilled down her cheeks. "Though, if you ever do something like that again, I'll shoot you myself." "Fair enough." Rowan tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, gasping as pain lanced through his chest. "Stop that," Clara said sharply, pressing him back down. "Doctor's orders. You're to stay flat for at least another week. You tore some of the stitching when you tried to get up yesterday." "I don't remember trying to get up yesterday." "You were delirious with fever, kept saying you had to check on the cattle, that Martha needed you, that you had to protect me from something." Clara's voice softened. "You've been through hell, Rowan. Your body needs time to heal." A week flat on his back felt like torture, but Rowan recognized the futility of arguing with both Clara and his own body. He settled back against the pillows with a frustrated sigh. "Tell me what happened. After I got shot. I remember fragments, but nothing coherent." Clara took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "After you went down, I shot the man who'd shot you. Sheriff Ramsey and the others dealt with the remaining outlaws. There was a lot of gunfire, a lot of chaos. The fire brigade managed to save most of the bank, though the interior's pretty damaged. We lost Pete and Billy, and 3 other men were wounded, but it could have been much worse. And you, your injury, reopened some of the stitches during the fight. Doc Morrison wasn't pleased with either of us." She managed a weak smile. "We're quite a pair, both of us stubborn enough to fight when we should be healing." "Sounds about right." Rowan's eyes were growing heavy again despite having just woken up. "How long have you been sitting there?" "Don't worry about that, Clara. Since they brought you here, with breaks for necessities, before you start lecturing me." She squeezed his hand. "I couldn't leave you, Rowan. I needed to know you'd be all right." "I am all right. Or I will be." He fought against the exhaustion pulling at him. "But you need to take care of yourself too. Promise me you'll rest." "Proper rest. Not just sitting in a chair watching over me." "I'll rest when you're out of danger." "I'm out of danger now. Morrison said I'd be fine." "He said the next few hours would tell the tale. That was 2 days ago. We still have hours to account for." Clara's voice was stubborn, but Rowan could see the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "Then compromise with me. Go sleep in a real bed for a few hours. Mary can sit with me. When you wake up, come back, and I promise I'll still be here." Clara looked like she wanted to argue, but a jaw-cracking yawn undermined her protest. Finally, she nodded. 4 hours. Then I'm coming back. Take 6. 4. 5, and that's my final offer." Despite everything, Clara laughed. "You're negotiating while flat on your back with a bullet wound. You really are the most stubborn man I've ever met." "Takes one to know one." She leaned down carefully, mindful of his injury, and kissed him softly. 5 hours. But if anything changes, Mary wakes me immediately." "Deal." Mary Henderson appeared as if summoned, took one look at Clara's exhausted face, and practically marched her out of the room. Rowan heard their voices fading down the hallway, Mary's scolding and Clara's weak protests, and felt himself smile despite the pain. He slept again, deeper this time, his body finally believing it was safe enough to truly rest. When he woke, true to her word, Clara was back in the chair beside him, but this time she looked more rested, her face cleaner, her dress changed. She was reading a book, her lips moving slightly as she followed the words, and Rowan took a moment just to watch her, marveling at how this woman had become so essential to his existence in such a short time. "You're staring," Clara said without looking up from her book. "How did you know I was awake?" "Your breathing changed." She closed the book and met his eyes, a soft smile playing at her lips. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Sore, but better." It was true. The fog in his mind had cleared considerably, and while his chest ached, the pain was manageable. "What are you reading?" "Shakespeare. The Hendersons have an impressive library." Clara held up the volume. "The Tempest. Seemed appropriate given recent events. We've certainly been through our own storm." "Read to me?" "You want me to read Shakespeare to you?" Clara's eyebrows rose. "I didn't take you for a poetry man." "I'm not, usually, but I like your voice." Rowan felt heat creep up his neck at the admission. "And it'll keep my mind off the pain." Clara's expression softened into something tender and warm. "All right then. But I warn you, I do all the character voices." She read to him for over an hour, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of the verse, occasionally breaking into different tones for different characters. Rowan found himself less interested in the actual story and more captivated by watching her face animate with the words, the way her eyes lit up at passages she particularly loved, the small smile that played at her lips during the comic moments. This was what the rest of his life could look like, he realized. Quiet moments like this, punctuated by hard work and occasional danger, but always coming back to this, Clara's presence, her voice, her steadfast determination to stay by his side even when everything tried to tear them apart. "Clara," he interrupted during a pause between acts. She looked up. "Yes?" "When I'm healed, I want to marry you, properly, with the Reverend and the whole town if you want. I want everyone to know you're mine, and I'm yours." The words tumbled out, lacking poetry or grace, but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I also know I don't want to spend another day without you in my life." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling wider than he'd ever seen. "Is this the bullet wound talking, or is this really you?" "It's really me. Been thinking it since before I got shot. Just took nearly dying to give me the courage to say it." Rowan reached for her hand. "I love you, Clara Merrick. I think I started loving you the moment you stood in Sheriff Ramsey's office and shook my hand like you meant business. You made me want to live again instead of just survive. You made me believe I deserved another chance at happiness." "Rowan," Clara's voice broke, tears spilling freely now. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me. And yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry you tomorrow, if Doc Morrison would allow it, which he won't. So I'll marry you the moment you're healed enough to stand before the Reverend without falling over." "That's all I need to hear." Rowan pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Though, fair warning, I'm a terrible dancer, I snore sometimes, and I've been told I'm unreasonably stubborn." "Good thing I'm unreasonably stubborn too, then. We'll balance each other out." Clara wiped her eyes with her free hand. "And I don't care about dancing. I care about building a life with you, about turning that ranch into a real home, about maybe getting those horses I mentioned, and filling that house with more than just silence and ghosts." "Children?" Rowan asked carefully, not sure if the topic was too much too soon. Clara's smile turned soft and hopeful. "Someday, when we're both ready, when we've had time to be just us for a while." She paused. "Would you want that? I know you lost a daughter." "I did. And for a long time I thought wanting another child would be betraying her memory somehow. But you were right about what you said before. The people we lost would want us to live fully. And I think Sarah would want me to be a father again, to love again. Not to replace her, but to honor her by not letting fear stop me from living." "Sarah," Claire repeated softly. "That was her name?" "Yeah. Sarah Grace Hale. She was 5 when—" Rowan's voice caught. "She would have been 14 now, almost grown. I miss so much of her life because I couldn't bear to think about it. But lately, I've been remembering the good things. Her laugh. The way she used to follow me around the workshop, asking a million questions. How she loved thunderstorms and hated peas. She sounds wonderful." She was. And Rachel, my wife, she was patient and kind and loved me despite my rough edges. Rowan met Clara's eyes. I loved them both with everything I had, and I'll always carry them with me. But loving you doesn't diminish that. It's different, but it's just as real. I understand. My family will always be part of me too, but that doesn't mean there isn't room in my heart for new love, new family. Clara squeezed his hand. We're both building on foundations of loss, Rowan, but maybe that makes us stronger. Maybe that means we know how precious this is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands joined, the weight of their promises settling around them like a warm blanket. Finally, Clara picked up the book again. Should I continue reading, or would you rather rest? Read. I'm not tired, and your voice helps. She read until the light outside began to fade, until Mary came to check on them and bring Rowan some thin broth that he managed to keep down. Sheriff Ramsey stopped by that evening, his arm in a sling, but his spirits good. You're looking better, Ramsey said, settling carefully into a chair. Gave us quite a scare, Hale. Didn't mean to. How are you holding up? Bullet creased my shoulder. I'll be fine in a week or two. The sheriff's expression turned serious. I wanted to thank you, and Miss Merrick. You both showed real courage during that fight. Without you, more people would have died. We did what needed doing, Rowan said simply. That you did. Ramsey pulled out a small leather pouch and set it on the bedside table. Town council voted to give you both a reward, $500 each. It's not much considering what you went through, but it's what we could spare with the bank repairs and all. That's not necessary, Clara protested. It's necessary to us. You defended our home, both of you. You earned it. The sheriff stood, wincing slightly. Take care of yourself, Rowan. Town needs men like you, men willing to stand up when it matters. After Ramsey left, Clara opened the pouch and counted the money with wide eyes. $500. Combined with the reward from before, that's... She did quick mental arithmetic. That's enough to expand the ranch significantly. Buy breeding stock, repair the barn, maybe even build an addition to the house. Or you could use it to go wherever you wanted, Rowan said carefully. California, Oregon, anywhere. You're not obligated to stay just because I asked you to marry me. If you want to see more of the world before settling down. Rowan Hale, did that bullet scramble your brains? Clara's voice was sharp. I just agreed to marry you. I'm not going anywhere except back to that ranch with you as soon as Doc Morrison clears you both. We're using this money to build our future together, not to run from it. Just wanted to make sure you knew you had options. My option is you. It's been you since you reluctantly agreed to let me stay in your spare room and then couldn't hide the fact that you were a good man under all that gruff exterior. When Clara set the money aside and took his hand again, stop trying to give me reasons to leave. I'm staying. Get used to it. Yes, ma'am. The days that followed fell into a routine that was both tedious and oddly domestic. Rowan chafed against the forced inactivity, but Clara kept him entertained with reading, conversation, and updates about the town. She'd visit the ranch every few days with one of the townsmen who'd volunteered to help with the essential chores, coming back with reports about the cattle and repairs needed. The fence we fixed is holding well, she told him one afternoon. But the barn door needs new hinges, and I think we've got a family of raccoons living in the hayloft. Raccoons can wait. The hinges can't. Rowan shifted in bed, frustrated by his weakness. I should be there helping. You should be here healing so you can help for the next 40 years instead of reopening that wound and being useless for months. Clara's logic was irrefutable. Patience, Rowan. We have time. Doc Morrison finally cleared Rowan to move around after 12 days, though with strict instructions not to lift anything heavy or do any strenuous work for at least another month. Rowan felt like a caged animal finally released, even though he could barely walk from the bedroom to the kitchen without getting winded. It'll come back, Morrison assured him. You lost a lot of blood, and your body needs time to rebuild its strength. Don't rush it, or you'll end up right back in bed. The first time Rowan managed to walk outside and sit on the Hendersons' porch, breathing fresh air and feeling sunlight on his face, Clara sat beside him with a triumphant smile. One step at a time, she said. Literally. Well, yes, but metaphorically too. She leaned her head on his shoulder, his good shoulder, and Rowan felt something settle in his chest. Not the pain of the healing wound, but the peace of knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be. They planned the wedding for 6 weeks after the shooting, giving Rowan time to fully recover and allowing Clara to work with Mary Henderson and the other town women to prepare. Rowan would have been content with a simple ceremony in the sheriff's office, but Clara wanted to do it properly, and he found he couldn't deny her anything. The day he was finally strong enough to ride back out to the ranch was a milestone they both celebrated. Clara had been staying with the Hendersons while Rowan recovered, and though they'd seen each other daily, there was something significant about returning to their land together. The ranch looked exactly as they'd left it. The partially finished chicken coop, the repaired fence line, the small house that would become their home. Duke and Daisy welcomed them with familiar nickers, and even the cattle seemed to recognize their return. "Home," Clara said softly, dismounting and just standing there, taking it all in. "Home," Rowan agreed. They spent the afternoon walking the property, slowly, at Rowan's pace, talking about their plans. Where they'd expand the barn, where Clara's garden would go, which pasture would be best for the horses they'd eventually buy. Every discussion was about we and our, about a future they'd build together. As the sun began to set, they sat on the porch steps, shoulders touching, watching the light paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said. "Anything." "That night when you threw yourself in front of that bullet, did you think about it first? Was it a conscious choice or just instinct?" Rowan considered the question carefully. "Both, maybe. I saw the gun swinging toward you, and there was no thought process, just action, but also—" He paused. "Also, I knew in that moment that losing you would hurt worse than any bullet could. So if one of us was going to get shot, I'd rather it be me." "That's both incredibly romantic and incredibly stupid," Clara said, but her voice was thick with emotion. "I've been accused of being both before." She turned to face him, her hand cupping his cheek. "I'm glad you survived. I'm glad we both survived. And I'm glad that in a few weeks I get to stand before this whole town and promise to spend the rest of my life with you. Even knowing I'll probably do something stupid and romantic again." "Especially knowing that." Clara kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Because I'll probably do something stupid and romantic right back, and at least we'll be idiots together." The storm that rolled in that evening was sudden and fierce, the way storms often were in Wyoming. Thunder rumbled across the plains, and rain began falling in sheets, drumming against the roof and turning the world outside into a blur. They'd barely made it inside before the deluge started, and now stood in the main room, watching lightning flash through the windows. "We should stay here tonight," Clara said. "It's not safe to ride back in this." Rowan knew she was right, though the propriety of it concerned him. They weren't married yet, and while they'd been living on the ranch together before his injury, that was different somehow. But the alternative was risking their lives, and their horses, in a dangerous storm. "You take Martha's room," he said. "I'll take mine. Rowan, we're getting married in a few weeks. I think we can manage to be in the same house overnight without a chaperone. It's not about capability. It's about doing things right by you." Clara's expression softened. "You're a good man, Rowan Hale, but I trust you, and I trust myself. We'll be fine." They prepared a simple dinner and ate while the storm raged outside, conversation flowing easily between them. They talked about the wedding, who would come, what Clara would wear, where they'd hold the reception. They talked about expanding the herd next spring, about the horse breeding operation Clara had been researching, about possibly hiring a ranch hand to help with the heavier work. Every topic circled back to the same theme, building a life together. Making plans that extended years into the future, as if they had all the time in the world to make them real. After dinner, they sat in the main room, a fire crackling in the hearth to ward off the chill brought by the rain. Clara had brought her Shakespeare volume, and she read aloud while Rowan whittled a piece of wood. Doctor's orders included keeping his hands active to maintain strength and dexterity. "What are you making?" Clara asked during a pause. "Not sure yet. Maybe a figurine for your garden. Maybe just practicing." He turned the wood in his hands. "I used to do this all the time, back when I was a carpenter. Haven't had the patience for it in years." "What changed?" "You." He met her eyes. "You make me want to create again instead of just maintain. Make me want to build things that last." Clara set the book aside and moved closer, settling beside him and watching his hands work the wood with practiced ease. The intimacy of the moment, the quiet domesticity of it, felt more significant than any grand gesture could have. "I never thought I'd have this," she said softly. "After my brother died, after I sold the farm, I thought the best I could hope for was survival. Maybe find work somewhere, live a quiet, lonely life, and try not to think too hard about everything I'd lost. What changed for you?" "You." She smiled at throwing his word back at him. "You showed me that survival isn't enough, that it's okay to want more, to reach for happiness even when it scares you. That love isn't for dreamers, it's for people brave enough to risk getting hurt again." The storm intensified, thunder shaking the windows, but inside the small house they were safe and warm and together. When Clara's eyes grew heavy, she leaned against Rowan's shoulder, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of sleep. Rowan set aside his whittling and just sat there, holding her, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breath against his side. This moment, this quiet, perfect moment, was worth every loss he'd endured to get here, worth the pain, the grief, the years of loneliness, because it led him to her. Clara stirred against him, murmuring something unintelligible but not waking. Rowan carefully adjusted his position so she'd be more comfortable, mindful of both their healing injuries. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows across the room, and outside the storm raged on. But inside, there was only peace, only the promise of tomorrow and the day after, and all the days stretching out before them like an unwritten story waiting to be lived. When Clara woke the next morning, she was still curled against Rowan's side, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Soft dawn light filtered through the windows, and the storm had passed, leaving the world outside washed clean and new. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, not wanting to disturb this peace, this sense of rightness that felt almost too precious to be real. But Rowan was already awake, his thumb tracing absent circles on her shoulder, his breathing steady and calm. "Morning," he murmured when she stirred. "Morning." Clara sat up slowly, her side pulling with the movement, a reminder that she too was still healing. "I fell asleep on you. I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was perfect." Rowan's voice was rough with sleep but warm with contentment. "Best night's sleep I've had in years, actually. Having you here, knowing you're safe, I slept better than I have since before the shooting." Clara studied his face in the morning light. The lines around his eyes seemed softer somehow. The perpetual tension in his jaw relaxed. He looked younger, more at peace, more like the man he might have been if loss hadn't carved him into something harder. "We should probably head back to town," she said reluctantly. "People will talk if we're not back soon." "Let them talk. We're getting married in a few weeks anyway." But Rowan stood, stretching carefully, testing the limits of his healing wound. "Though you're right, no sense causing scandal before we need to." They made breakfast together, moving around the small kitchen with an ease that spoke of growing familiarity. Clara scrambled eggs while Rowan made coffee, their movements synchronized like a dance they'd been practicing for years rather than weeks. It felt like a glimpse of their future. Thousands of mornings just like this one, building a life one quiet moment at a time. The ride back to Pine Hollow was leisurely, both of them reluctant to return to the reality of town and other people after their peaceful night alone. The land sparkled from the rain, every blade of grass jeweled with water droplets, the air crisp and clean. Rowan found himself looking at the familiar landscape with new eyes, seeing it not just as the harsh country he'd survived in, but as the beautiful land he'd share with Clara. "I've been thinking about the wedding," Clara said as they rode. "I know we planned it for 6 weeks out, but that's still a month away. What if we moved it up?" Rowan glanced at her, surprised. "You want to wait longer?" "I want to wait less. I want to marry you next week, if Reverend Michaels will do it." Claire's voice was firm but vulnerable. "I know it seems rushed, and maybe people will think we're being impulsive, but Rowan, life is short and uncertain. We both know that better than most. I don't want to wait anymore." "Neither do I." Relief washed through him at her words. "I've been thinking the same thing. Every day we wait feels like we're tempting fate, like something might come along and take this away from us." "So we move it up?" "We move it up. I'll talk to the Reverend today. If he can do it next Saturday, we'll do it next Saturday. Clara's smile was radiant, worth more than all the gold in the territory. Next Saturday. 1 week from today, I'll be Clara Hale. How does that sound to you? Like coming home. When they reached Pine Hollow, the town was already buzzing with activity. News of their night at the ranch had somehow already spread, small towns being what they were, but most of the talk was sympathetic rather than scandalous. They'd defended the town together, nearly died together, and the people of Pine Hollow weren't inclined to judge two people who clearly loved each other for wanting to be alone during a storm. Reverend Michaels was more than willing to move the wedding up, his weathered face creasing into a smile when they explained their reasons. "Love like yours doesn't need a long engagement," he said simply. "You've already been tested by fire. Literally, in your case, Mr. Hale. I'd be honored to marry you next Saturday." Mary Henderson took the news with characteristic enthusiasm, immediately drafting half the women in town to help prepare. Clara tried to protest that it didn't need to be elaborate, but Mary waved her off. "Nonsense! This town owes you both a debt. Let us celebrate you properly." Her eyes were knowing and kind. "Besides, after everything Pine Hollow has been through lately, we could use something joyful to focus on." The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparation. Clara split her time between helping with wedding arrangements and working at the ranch with Rowan, neither of them wanting to be apart for long. They finished the chicken coop together, working slowly but steadily, and Rowan taught Clara how to properly oil and maintain the ranch equipment for winter. "We'll need to stock up on feed," he explained as they worked. "Winter comes hard and fast out here. Sometimes the snows are deep enough that we can't get to town for weeks at a time." "So we'll be truly alone together," Clara said, the prospect not sounding frightening at all. "Just us and the animals and the snow." "It can be isolating, lonely, if you're not with the right person." Rowan paused in his work, looking at her seriously. "You sure you're ready for that? For months of nothing but this ranch and me? I'm marrying you, aren't I? That means I'm choosing all of it, the hard winters, the isolation, the work. Because I'll have you, and that's enough." Clara crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "Stop waiting for me to realize I've made a mistake. I haven't. This is exactly where I want to be." On Wednesday, 3 days before the wedding, a rider came to the ranch with news that made Rowan's blood run cold. Sheriff Ramsey wanted to see them both immediately. There'd been a development in the outlaw gang situation. They rode to town with growing apprehension, finding Ramsey in his office with a man Rowan didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and lean, with a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned to his vest and the hard eyes of someone who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. "Rowan, Clara, this is Marshal Webb," Ramsey said. "He's been tracking the gang that hit our town. Turns out they were part of a larger operation than we knew." Webb nodded in greeting, his expression grave. "The men you captured and killed were members of the Barlow gang. They've been operating across 3 territories for the past 2 years. The leader, Silas Barlow, is still at large, and according to our intelligence, he's been gathering what's left of his men." "For what purpose?" Clara asked, though Rowan suspected she already knew the answer. "Revenge. His brother was one of the men killed in the bank raid. He's sworn to make Pine Hollow pay, particularly the 2 of you." Webb's gaze moved between them. "I'm here to offer you protective custody until we can apprehend him." "Protective custody means leaving," Rowan said flatly. "Leaving the ranch? Leaving the town." "How long?" "Could be weeks, could be months. Barlow's smart and careful. He won't move until he's sure he can succeed." Clara and Rowan exchanged a long look, an entire conversation passing between them in silence. Then Clara turned back to the marshal. "Thank you for the offer, but we're staying. We have a wedding on Saturday, and we're not letting some outlaw dictate our lives." "Ma'am, I understand your desire to stay, but this man is dangerous. He's killed at least 12 people that we know of, and he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." "Then he'll have to come through the whole town to get to us," Rowan said. "We're not running. We've both run from enough in our lives. This is our home, and we're defending it." Ramsey leaned forward. "If you're staying, we need to be smart about this. Postguards, keep you both under watch. The wedding will have to be secured." "The wedding will happen as planned," Clara said firmly. "But we'll take reasonable precautions. Postguards if you need to. We'll stay vigilant, But we're not hiding, and we're not postponing our lives. Webb looked like he wanted to argue, but something in their expressions must have convinced him it would be pointless. All right, but I'm stationing men around the town and the ranch. You see anything suspicious? Anything at all? You report it immediately. Over the next 2 days, Pine Hollow transformed into something resembling an armed camp. Marshal Webb brought in 4 additional deputies, and they set up watch rotations covering all approaches to the town. Rowan and Clara continued their wedding preparations, but now with armed escorts accompanying them everywhere. The tension was exhausting, every shadow a potential threat, every stranger a possible enemy. But it also clarified something for both of them. They'd found each other against impossible odds, and they weren't going to let fear steal what they'd built. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, Clara stayed with the Hendersons while Rowan remained at the ranch with 2 deputies posted outside. It was tradition for the bride and groom to spend the night before the wedding apart, and despite the danger, they'd decided to honor it. But sleep eluded Rowan. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Clara alone in town, about tomorrow, about the life they were about to begin. Every creak of the house made him tense, every distant sound a potential threat. The deputies were capable men, but Rowan had learned the hard way that capable wasn't always enough. Around midnight, a knock at the door brought him instantly alert, gun in hand. But it was just one of the deputies, his face apologetic in the lamplight. "Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Hale. Marshal Webb wanted me to report that they caught someone watching Miss Merrick's window at the Henderson house. Turned out to be young Danny Sykes, Harker's cousin, the one who helped him escape. He broke out of jail 2 days ago, and we didn't even know he was gone." Rowan's blood ran cold. "Is Clara all right?" "She's fine. Webb has her under close guard. The kid's back in custody, and he's talking. Says Barlow is planning to hit during the wedding tomorrow. Figures that's when everyone will be gathered in one place, when you and Miss Merrick will be most vulnerable. So we cancel the wedding." Webb says that might be exactly what Barlow wants, to keep you on edge indefinitely, waiting for an attack that might never come, or that comes when you finally let your guard down. The deputy shifted uncomfortably. "He's suggesting we use the wedding as bait. Bring Barlow in, end this once and for all." Rowan felt fury and fear war in his chest. He wants to use Clara as bait? He wants to use both of you as bait, but with the whole town on alert, with every deputy and capable man armed and ready, he thinks we can protect you while drawing Barlow out. It was a risk, a terrible, dangerous risk, but the alternative was living in fear indefinitely, always looking over their shoulders, never knowing when the threat would materialize. Rowan thought about Clara, about the life they wanted to build, and he knew what she'd say. "I need to talk to Clara, first thing in the morning, before we decide anything." "Marshall figured you'd say that. He'll bring her here at dawn." True to his word, Webb arrived with Clara as the sun was rising, her face pale but determined. The moment she saw Rowan, she went to him, and they held each other for a long moment before turning to face the marshal together. "You've heard the plan?" Webb asked. "We've heard it," Clara said, "and we're doing it. The wedding happens as scheduled. We end this today." "Clara, if something goes wrong, then something goes wrong. But Rowan, I'm not living the rest of my life in fear. I won't let this man steal our joy, our future, our wedding day." Her voice was fierce. "We've both survived too much to let fear win now." Webb outlined the plan in detail. The wedding would proceed as planned in the church at noon. Every person entering would be checked for weapons. Those belonging to townspeople would be allowed, but any strangers would be denied entry. Sharpshooters would be positioned in buildings surrounding the church. Deputies would be stationed at every entrance. The entire town would be on alert. "It's a solid plan," Webb said, "but I can't guarantee your safety. You need to understand that." "Nobody can guarantee anyone's safety," Rowan said. "We could die tomorrow from 100 different causes that have nothing to do with Barlow. At least this way, we're choosing to live instead of hide." The morning of the wedding was bright and clear, the autumn sky that particular shade of blue that only seemed to exist in Wyoming. Clara dressed at the Henderson house, wearing a simple but beautiful cream-colored dress that Mary had helped her make. It wasn't elaborate. Frontier weddings rarely were, but it fit her perfectly, elegant in its simplicity. Mary fussed over her hair, pinning it up with small white flowers that someone had managed to find despite the late season. "You look beautiful, dear. Rowan's going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." "I just want this day to be perfect," Clara said softly. "After everything we've been through, we deserve one perfect day." "You'll have it. The whole town is determined to make sure of that." Mary's voice was warm but worried, "though I wish it didn't come with quite so much danger. The best things in life usually do." At the ranch, Rowan dressed in his best clothes, a new shirt Clara had bought him, dark trousers, and the boots he'd polished until they gleamed. He felt strangely calm, the anxiety of the previous days replaced by a sense of clarity. Today he would marry the woman he loved, and whatever came after, they'd face it together. Sheriff Ramsey arrived to escort him to the church, along with 2 armed deputies. "You ready for this?" Ramsey asked. "More ready than I've been for anything in 9 years." The church was already filling with people when they arrived. It seemed like the entire town had turned out, along with folks from neighboring ranches who'd heard about the wedding. Every man was armed, every face alert, but there was also genuine joy in the air. Whatever happened, Pine Hollow was determined to celebrate this union. Rowan took his place at the front of the church, Ramsey standing beside him as his best man. Reverend Michaels gave him an encouraging nod. And then the doors opened and Clara appeared. She was beautiful in a way that made Rowan's chest ache. Not the polished beauty of Eastern ladies, but something more real, more earned. She'd survived loss and danger and heartbreak, and she was walking toward him with her head high and hope in her eyes. Mary Henderson walked beside her, serving as the mother of the bride in the absence of Clara's own family. Clara's eyes never left Rowan's as she walked down the aisle. He saw her note the armed men stationed around the church, saw her shoulders tense briefly, but her stride never faltered. She reached the front of the church and took his offered hand, her fingers trembling slightly in his. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You look terrified," she whispered back with a small smile. "Not of marrying you, just of everything else." "Then let's focus on us and forget everything else, just for right now." Reverend Michaels began the ceremony, his voice carrying through the packed church. Rowan tried to focus on the words, on the significance of the moment, but part of his mind stayed alert to every sound, every movement. He saw Clara fighting the same battle, her attention divided between the ceremony and the potential threat. "Do you, Rowan Hale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" "I do." His voice was firm, absolute. "And do you, Clara Merrick, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" "I do." Clara's voice was equally strong, her eyes shining with tears. Crash from outside the church shattered the moment. Shouts erupted, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Marshal Webb appeared in the doorway, his gun drawn. "They're here! North side, at least 6 riders!" Chaos erupted. Women screamed, men rushed for the doors, everyone trying to either flee or fight. But Reverend Michaels raised his voice above the commotion. "Wait, the ceremony isn't finished!" His aged face was fierce. "These 2 people have fought for this moment, and by God, they're going to have it. Everyone, sit down!" The authority in his voice was startling enough to make people pause. More gunfire sounded outside, but Michaels pressed on, speaking faster but not skipping anything important. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Rowan, you may kiss your bride, and then for the love of heaven, everyone get to safety." Rowan pulled Clara to him and kissed her hard, pouring every ounce of love and promise and desperate hope into it. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, the sound of battle raging outside. "Well, Mrs. Hale," Rowan said, "ready for the rest of our life?" "It's already more exciting than I expected," Clara said, then grabbed the rifle that Ramsey had stashed beneath the altar. "Let's go finish this." They emerged from the church into controlled chaos. Barlow's gang had indeed attacked, but they'd underestimated the town's preparation. Webb's sharpshooters had taken out 2 riders immediately. The remaining 4 found themselves caught in crossfire from multiple directions, with nowhere to retreat. Rowan spotted Barlow himself, a hard-faced man with cold eyes, trying to circle toward the church. The outlaw saw him at the same moment, and their eyes locked across the dusty street. "You're the one," Barlow shouted over the gunfire. "You're the one who killed my brother." Your brother tried to kill innocent people, Rowan called back. He made his choice, and now you'll pay for it. Barlow raised his gun, but before he could fire, Clara's rifle cracked beside Rowan. The shot hit Barlow's gun hand, sending his weapon spinning away. The outlaw howled with pain and rage, clutching his shattered hand. Marshal Webb and his deputies swarmed in, taking Barlow and his remaining men into custody. The entire attack had lasted less than 5 minutes, ending almost as quickly as it had begun. One deputy was wounded, several townspeople had minor injuries, but miraculously, no one had been killed. As the dust settled, Rowan turned to Clara, who was lowering her rifle with shaking hands. Her wedding dress had dirt on the hem, and there was a smudge of gunpowder on her cheek, but she'd never looked more beautiful to him. "Nice shot, Mrs. Hale." "Thank you, Mr. Hale." She set the rifle aside and stepped into his arms. "So, is this how all frontier weddings go?" "Just the memorable ones." They stood there in the middle of the street, holding each other while the town rallied around them. People emerged from buildings, checking on neighbors, helping the wounded, and slowly beginning to celebrate the fact that the threat was finally ended. Barlow and his gang were captured or dead. The danger that had hung over Pine Hollow was lifted. Mary Henderson appeared with a basket of food. Well, that was certainly dramatic, but we've still got a wedding reception to hold, danger or no danger. Everyone to the town hall. The reception that followed was part celebration, part relief, and entirely joyful. Someone produced a fiddle, another a harmonica, and soon music filled the town hall. Food appeared from a dozen different sources as families contributed what they could. Children ran between the adults, their laughter a reminder that life went on, that joy persisted even after danger. Rowan and Clara stood in the center of it all, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but mostly just holding each other and marveling at the fact that they'd made it. Against all odds, through danger and loss and fear, they'd found each other and built something worth fighting for. "Dance with me," Clara said suddenly. "I told you I'm a terrible dancer." "I don't care. It's our wedding, and I want to dance with my husband." So they danced, Rowan stumbling through the steps while Clara laughed and guided him. It was clumsy and imperfect and absolutely perfect. Around them, other couples joined in, and soon the hall was filled with spinning, laughing people, celebrating not just a wedding, but survival, community, and hope. As the evening wore on and the celebration began to wind down, Rowan and Clara slipped away, riding back to the ranch under a sky full of stars. The deputies had been recalled, the threat ended. They were finally, truly alone. The ranch house was dark and quiet when they arrived. Rowan lit a lamp while Clara stood in the doorway, looking around at the simple room that was now their shared home. "It's not much," Rowan said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's everything." Clara moved to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and laying her head against his chest. "It's home. It's ours. That's all I need." They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together, feeling the weight of the day settle into something softer, warmer. Finally, Rowan tilted Clara's face up to his and kissed her, gentle and reverent and full of promise. "I love you, Clara Hale. I love you too, Rowan Hale, and I'm going to love you for the rest of our lives." That night, as they lay together in the room that was now theirs, Rowan found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. The loss, the pain, the years of loneliness, the way Clara had crashed into his life and refused to let him hide anymore. The courage it had taken for both of them to reach for happiness after so much grief. "What are you thinking about?" Clara murmured, her head pillowed on his shoulder. "About how I thought love was for dreamers, for people who hadn't learned how cruel life could be." Rowan's arm tightened around her. "But I was wrong. Love isn't for dreamers. It's for survivors. For people brave enough to keep reaching for happiness, even when they know how much it can hurt. We are survivors, aren't we?" Clara's voice was thoughtful. "We survived loss, we survived danger, and now we get to survive the hard work of building a life together. Is that what you want? A life here, with me, doing the hard work? Every single day." She lifted her head to look at him, her eyes serious in the lamplight. "I want mornings with coffee and conversation. I want to work beside you in the summer heat and sit by the fire with you in the winter cold. I want to argue about stupid things and laugh about the ridiculous things. I want to build something that lasts, something that matters. With you. Then that's what we'll do. Rowan kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. We'll build a life worth living. We'll raise cattle and horses, maybe children, when we're ready. We'll grow old together on this land, and we'll make every day count. Promise? I promise. The months and years that followed were not without challenge. Wyoming winters were brutal, summer droughts tested their resolve, and the daily work of ranching was backbreaking and endless. But through it all, Rowan and Clara faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. They expanded the herd, built a proper barn, and eventually started the horse breeding operation Clara had dreamed about. Their reputation for quality stock spread across the territory, and the ranch prospered. They hired ranch hands to help with the work, turning their isolated homestead into a thriving operation. 3 years after their wedding, Clara gave birth to a daughter. They named her Sarah Grace, honoring the memory of Rowan's first daughter while celebrating this new life. Rowan held his newborn daughter and wept, not with grief but with gratitude, amazed that he'd been given this second chance at fatherhood. 2 years later, a son arrived, William James, after Clara's father and brother. The house that had been so silent and empty now rang with children's laughter, with the daily chaos of family life. Rowan would sometimes stand on the porch at sunset, watching Clara teach their daughter to ride or their son chase chickens, and marvel at how completely his life had transformed. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked one such evening, coming to stand beside him, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. "About how wrong I was," Rowan said. "I thought happiness was behind me, that the best I could hope for was getting through each day without too much pain, but you showed me that wasn't living at all." "We saved each other," Clara said simply. "You gave me a reason to stop running from my grief and start building again. I gave you permission to hope again. Best decision I ever made, saying yes when Ramsey asked me to take you in. Best decision I ever made, falling asleep on your shoulder by that fire." Clara leaned against him, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the golden light of approaching sunset. Inside the house, the fire crackled in the hearth. Dinner waited on the stove, and the life they'd built together hummed with warmth and purpose. It wasn't perfect. Life never was. There were still hard days, still moments when old grief surfaced unexpectedly. But there was also joy, deep and abiding, earned through survival and choice and the courage to love again. The cowboy who had thought love was for dreamers had learned that love was actually for fighters, for people stubborn enough to reach for happiness even when the world tried to convince them they didn't deserve it, for survivors who refused to let loss define them, who chose to honor the dead by living fully rather than merely existing. And as the stars emerged one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, Rowan Hale held his wife close and thought about all the tomorrows stretching out before them, each one a gift, each one a chance to build, to grow, to love. Each one proof that happiness wasn't for dreamers. It was for people brave enough to fight for it, to defend it, to choose it every single day. The frontier was still hard, still unforgiving, still demanded everything from those who chose to make their lives there. But standing on his porch with Clara's hand in his, and their children's laughter floating on the evening breeze, Rowan finally understood that some things were worth every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of fear. Love was worth it, family was worth it, home was worth it, and he'd spend the rest of his days proving it, one sunrise at a time, building a legacy of hope from the ashes of loss. Because that's what survivors did. They endured. They persevered. And when they were lucky enough to find someone who understood the cost of survival, they held on tight and never let go. The fire inside the house cast warm light through the windows, a beacon in the gathering darkness. Clara squeezed his hand and smiled up at him, that same fierce, hopeful smile that had first cracked through his defenses all those years ago. "Come on, cowboy," she said. "Let's go home." And together they walked inside, closing the door on the night and opening it on all the days yet to come. Days filled with work and laughter, challenge and triumph. The ordinary miracles of a life well lived and a love hard won. The cowboy who thought love was for dreamers had discovered the greatest truth of all. Love wasn't a dream. It was the most real, most vital, most necessary thing in the world. It was what made survival worthwhile. It was what transformed existing into living. And in the end, it was the only thing that truly mattered.